Servus, and welcome to another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 4 here. We're happy this week to be joined by a fellow goaltender. I grew up going to a lot of goalie schools, and this guy was teaching me what he already knew about goaltending. And we stayed in touch throughout the years, and I always followed his career. He's now transitioned into the real estate business, but the Pro Hockey Podcast is proud to welcome Michael Ouzas to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. So right now, as you said, you're just at the office right now, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
No problem. Yeah. I like getting in the office early. It's kind of my thing. And when you were like, you want to jump on, and it works for me. So yeah, no, I'm excited.
So you were born in Hamilton, Ontario. Is that where you like kind of grew up, had your childhood, and like first learn to play hockey?
Yeah. So I'm from Hamilton. I lived there until basically going to juniors. I played for the AAA team there in Hamilton, and at the time we just had one team. Now there's two. If anyone is familiar with Hamilton, so we just had the one team, and we played basically started there, played AAA there for from when I was 10 to 15 or so, and then drafted the OHL and basically left Hamilton at 16 and haven't my parents are still there, but I live in Toronto now.
And that was actually one of my questions. So like when I grew up playing, there was the two Hamilton teams. There was the Reps who you played for, which were in the Alliance league or division, and then we also had the Hamilton Bulldogs, which were in the SCTA. So you were saying back when you played, it was just the Reps were the only team.
Yeah, so it was the Reps. I mean, there was a team in Stony Creek, which now like Hamilton is turned into like the greater Hamilton area type of thing. So um like that Bulldogs team, I think they're out of Stony Creek, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not exactly sure right now, but essentially that team was a different city, and now it's all kind of amalgamated into one Hamilton. So now there's two teams in Hamilton, let's say. But yeah, at the time it was the Hamilton Reps, and we were in the Alliance, and we had yeah, we had a really good team actually. We won a lot of tournaments. We went to the Pee Wee tournament. We finished, I think, second or third there, third. And then we played in the OHL Cup. We won the Alliance a few years in a row, and we had a lot of guys drafted the OHL. We were a really good team.
And one of my questions I'm always curious about, especially when talking to a goalie such as yourself, since I was a goalie, what made you want to become a goalie? Like, was this something that you always were fascinated by the position, or was it, just kind of got thrown in one day and you were good at it and they just kept you in there?
Combination of both, I think. Actually, it was pretty funny. Like on our street, I mean, street hockey was a big thing back then. I don't think the kids play anymore, but back when I was a kid, which was 30 years ago now, and I was playing, we actually had four goalies that lived on our street, and
Wow.
nobody wanted to play net. So being the youngest kid that wanted to play, I was always kind of the guy in net, and um, then I at some point I asked that was when the Leafs were also like Felix Potvin was in his heyday, and like you're talking 92, 93 when the Leafs were going to the Cup finals, and um yeah, and then basically just asked my parents if I could play hockey. Started out, I played like 5 or 6 games as a defenseman, and I was in net like right away, basically, and never looked back, and literally played for 30 years basically after that. So it was that was it, and I loved it, and I wore 29 my whole career because of Felix Potvin, and it was something that I was just fascinated by the gear, by like I just loved goalies. I still do, but at the time, that was like larger than life for me. It was just the how the goalies looked and stuff.
No, I can definitely relate to that. I've said before in this podcast, I think the reason I became a goalie was because I just wanted my helmet painted, and my
Yeah.
parents wouldn't let me do that to my defenseman helmet, so my player's bucket. But um, so did you like? Would you say that like right away you started like going to goalie schools maybe in summers to like get better every year, or was this something you kind of just picked up along the way and then eventually transitioned to those schools?
Yeah, so I actually didn't go to a goalie school until I was 13.
Wow.
So I played, I mean, now that sounds like an eternity later. These kids are there so young, but Yeah, we're just pretty much self-taught. I mean, we used to watch those VHS of like the puck stops here too. Actually, like I saw it on YouTube the other day. I was like, wow, this thing is unbelievable. Like, but we used to work on, we had our trainer at the time was like our goalie coach, and we work on like glove snaps and this is weird things back then, and um, pretty much self-taught. I watched a lot of hockey. I used to read those In Goal magazine um, magazines. Actually, like I know now it's all online, but back then it was like physical magazines with like screenshots. And I don't know if you remember those. You're probably too young for those too. Um, but yeah, I just was always kind of a student, always trying to learn. My goalie partner was also Dave Brown, was a really good goalie as well, and we pushed each other, and we just figured it out. I don't know how to explain it. We just kind of found ways to figure it out, stop pucks. He was a Kineski guy growing up. That was a popular goalie camp. I don't know if they're still around now, but I was literally never had been to a goalie camp until 13, and that's where we met, and I was there for for a good amount of years. But that was it, like 13. But that for me was a big change, because then I went from like just stopping pucks with like not really having a plan to stop pucks to like, okay, now let's learn how to butterfly properly, let's learn how to recover properly, let's learn how to butterfly slide. Like now all of a sudden I was like, not technical in stopping pucks to like add in technique, and I really was able to, like, my game elevated a ton after that.
I think it definitely at that age too probably would allow you to understand like the position a little more, because as you said, like you were just finding ways to stop pucks before, but then once you eventually transition to these goalie schools, they're teaching you, okay, in this situation, this is why you do this. This is why we slide here. This is why we stand our feet, etc. So like I feel like for any goalie that once you have eventually that teaching, like even if you start a little later like yourself, it definitely would elevate you. And you were always a massive that's what I noticed at the goalie schools. You were always a guy, like even when you were teaching us in video, like you were always like a student of the game, like trying to learn.
Yeah, I kept that my whole career. Like I've always been a student of the game, and even now, like I watch hockey, and it's different now. I watch it like I'm a fan, but like, I'm still watching what the goalies are doing, and how they're playing stuff. Like I just like, it's an innate thought
Mm-hmm.
process watching now. But when I was playing, I was always trying to, get a little bit better. How can I get that like 1% better? How can I just find ways, even at the top of my game? When I retired, basically when you retire, you're at kind of like you've hit your max, I'd say, at some point. And for me, it was like, how do I keep learning? And yeah, like once I added an element of technique to my, let's call it like, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, like natural ability to make saves, it really made a difference, because now all of a sudden you're not just going on instinct, you're also going on instinct plus technique and that natural puck stopping ability, which is something that you could teach that, but you like there's an element of like where someone can just stop pucks. Like it's just a natural element of like a pure pucks. Like you look even the NHL, like Craig Anderson, like, at his age, he's not the most technical guy, but like he stops a lot of, like, he's just a natural puck stopper. And that element I feel like has been kind of lost a little bit in the transition to a lot of the goalie coaching and stuff. But like that's kind of a, like, just that's how it used to be. You used to just have to find ways to stop pucks, and the guy shot it and you would like make a glove save and make a windmill and have your toe up, and it was just like a whatever, but that was it. Now like nobody does that really anymore. So
No chance you were doing a toe up save at Johnny Elkins goalie school. That was frowned upon. But no, I understand what you mean. Like I think especially us, like we aren't the biggest guys. Like I'm 5'10.5", and we were kind of taught, here's the technical side of it, but you also have to be that reactive kind of battle side of it. Like you said, just a puck stopper. And I do agree with you. I noticed it a lot over here now. Like there's a lot of goalies being taught and they just see what they see on TV and how, bigger guys play. And I try to, you know, remind them, hey, well, you're not 6'4", you're not 6'5". And even guys like Vasilevsky, who is 6'4", 6'5", I believe, he still plays like reactive and uses his hands, and that's something that I agree with you. I think goalies today are kind of getting away from and going more into like that row body blocking phase. But um, yeah, it's good. It's good to hear that from you and just like your opinion on it. I wanted to touch on one thing I thought was very interesting. So when you got drafted by Barrie in the third round, I believe, and the next year you go to Finland, like, can you talk me about that decision and just kind of what was your thought process there?
Yeah. So, I mean, my thought process was I didn't really know a thought process. um, Basically, what had happened was I was drafted by Barrie. Like I really wanted to play in the OHL. Like I wasn't really NCAA. Wasn't really. I don't know what it was. I just like my thought process now has changed like 20 years later, but at the time, you don't really know. It was literally like 20 years ago, like now, basically. Um, so I was drafted by Barrie, and then it was like, okay, the next step is tier two, right? So that's kind of like you played your AAA, 15 years old, next drafted. My partner was also drafted. I was third round, he was fifth round. And then it's like, okay, well, there's one team in Hamilton at the time was the Kilty Bees. I think now they're the Red Wings or whatever, the junior A team in the
Mm.
Ontario Junior League. And so the coach, we go to the camp, and the coach is like, okay, well, I want to keep both of you, and we want to bring in a 19-year-old. And like in at that time, like, or I'm sure it still is, like you're only playing what 35 games in that league. Like you're not playing very many games. So whatever that works out to be, like I don't know the exact number, but even if it's, let's say, 40, so you got a 19 or 20-year-old that's going to probably play minimum 20 games, and then me and my goalie partner are going to play what, like 10 games each, maybe. Like, so try to get a release. Had an opportunity to go to like Wellington, I think it was Wellington at the time, or some team like out in that area, and they wouldn't let me go. They wouldn't give me a release. So they basically were like, well, you can either play here or not, pretty much. Like there's nowhere for you to go. They wouldn't give me a release to anywhere in the Ontario League, so the junior league. So then I was playing in that there's like at the time, I again, like I don't know what it's like now, so like this was a long time ago, but I was playing in one of those prospect tournaments
Yeah.
in the summertime, and this coach comes up to my dad and I and was like, I had like the an advisor or whatever at the time, and he's like, would Mike be interested in going to play in Finland? We just got a team. They just moved up from the second junior league to the top junior league, which is a really good league in Europe. It's one of the best junior leagues in all of Europe for sure, and that's the SM Junior Liga in Finland. And it's like, would Mike be interested in coming to play? He'll play a lot of games. We don't have another goalie. The league's really good, and so that summer I went over there for like 3 weeks with my dad. We went over, spent 3 weeks in Finland. Like I'd never left home, never been out of the country, like, you know, and so again, we kind of asked like the Hamilton team if we could go like to a different team, and they said no. And then we're like, okay, well, we're just going to go to Finland. So I did, and I like packed up and I left. 9/11 happened like literally 2 days after I landed there. Like I landed on like the 8th or 9th, and like 9/11 was obviously on the 11th. And yeah, it was just landed over there, and then started my season in Finland. Not the most normal path, I'd say. If I could go back, I probably would have just stuck it out in tier two, to be honest. You just don't learn the same way. Like when you go over there, it's just different, right? Um yeah, I played a lot, but our team was very bad. We were playing at the time, like there was like a lot of really good players in that league that became like future NHLers, and we just weren't very competitive. And what it's like over there. Like if your team's not competitive, it's really difficult, especially in in Europe, like where the top teams are very top heavy. So it was I played a lot, faced a ton of rubber, and then came back and played in Barrie the next year.
Yeah, well, two things I wanted to ask you from that. Like, first was there ever the thought in your head to, hey, maybe I could just go play major midget for a year, because at least like you were going back to, where you just were there with the Hamilton reps and you knew you were going to play a lot. And I guess the second question would be, how was that transition to Finland? Like, as you said, like you're whatever you are, 16 years old, you're living away from home. And then obviously that event happened, which probably added some craziness to it. But like you said, you'd never been away from home. And, at 16 years old, you're going to another country where they speak another language, they eat different things. Like it's just totally different. Like, how was that for you?
Yeah. Well, it was different for sure. So the first part of the question, like I really had no interest in going back to AAA. I feel like I accomplished everything I could accomplish there. A lot of the team was dissembling. We just won the Alliance for like the third year in a row. We were really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then we played in the OHL Cup. I just had no thought process of going. Like the next step for me was tier two, basically, or OHL, obviously. But at the time in the OHL, you can only have two guys dressed, two draft picks dressed. Now I think it's changed. Now you can have different amounts, but at the time was, if you weren't a first or second rounder, you probably weren't sticking around almost across the board. So the first and second round picks stuck, and then yeah, as a third rounder, I wasn't really. They wanted me to play another year and obviously develop and come up. So yeah, like pretty much what had happened was when I went over there, like you got to think this was, I mean, it's not even that like iPhones weren't invented back then. It was like when I went over there, like people had like those Nokia is a Finnish company. They had like these little snake phones back then. Like you're talking like a little tiny, like everybody had a cell phone, but it was like different planet. None of my friends here had a cell phone. Like my parents would be like, "Okay, we're calling you at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday," and it probably cost them like $100 to call me for like 20 minutes. Like now it's so different. Now it's like, oh, hey, mom, you just pick up WhatsApp or FaceTime or whatever. Like you're on a phone in like 2 seconds. Back then, there it didn't exist. Like you're emailing people. I was doing correspondence with my high school in Hamilton at the time. It was a French school, it was a small school, so they were cool with doing correspondence, and that was even still like, you're like not to take anything away from my education, but at the time, like it's like, okay, here's the class, like you got to figure out how to do it online, which like, just so different than where things are at now, obviously. And yeah, like just a totally different planet. Like I was over there, like you don't know, like you don't have much of a connection with the outside world. I will say, like from a development standpoint, there was a lot of ice. You could go on the ice all the time. We had dedicated goalie practices all the time, like twice a week, once or twice a week with the goalie coach. So like what you're doing now, like with your team, or what you would have been doing with your team as a goalie coach with the whole system, they were doing that 20 years ago. And here that didn't really exist. Like it wasn't a thing as popular here. Like here we'd go to our summer camp and that was it, kind of thing. And there it was a big thing. So like it was good on that perspective. And like I feel like I became a lot better of a goalie. It was just, I think there was an element of like if I was here, I would have, like when I went over there, I lost pretty much all NCAA contact because people thought I was playing pro over there. So now all of a sudden it eliminated that entire route for me altogether, which I think I would have liked to, at least if I would have looked back at it now, playing tier two here would have been a big value. At least you have NCAA exposure and the opportunity to go there and see what comes up on that front too. But yeah, it was just, I mean, going over there, like I remember being mind blown. Like there was this Pepsi machine where you'd like call the number on your phone and they would like spit out a Pepsi and like charge your cell phone bill. And I was like, this is insane. Back like we're talking 2001,
Yeah.
like 25 years ago almost, right?
Yeah,
Like you're 20 years ago.
they were living in the
Like
future.
yeah, and I remember seeing like the first ever Nokia phone, because that was like all the rage there with like where you can watch video on the phone. It was like, wow, this is crazy. Like just that's how it was back then, but it's definitely very different now.
You touched briefly on the major, or sorry, the tier two junior NCAA side of it with that exposure. I'm also in the opinion, like, to be quite honest, like we're only 5 years apart. Like, I think in birth years, I don't think it's that big of a difference. But I grew up in Peterborough, so I only knew the OHL. I went to games every
Yeah.
Thursday. My plan also was I want to play in the OHL. Do you think, like, especially when you were playing, and even for me, I didn't really learn about NCAA until I moved to Burlington because my best friend's dad had played and he said how much fun it was. But do you think that back then it was more like, okay, if you're good enough, you're gonna go play OHL. If not, you're just gonna go tier two and then see what happens kind of mindset?
Oh yeah, it was definitely different. And like now the NCAA, like it was really good. Like so my goalie partner Dave, like he went NCAA, played at Notre Dame, had a great career there, signed like drafted NHL, signed a pro contract. Like um that route really worked well for him. And I do think now looking back, like I really like that route for goalies. Looking back at it now, like, and it's very different now. So back then was all about OHL, 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 like you said. Like that was kind of like I want to go to the OHL. I want to play 3 years. I want to go play in the NHL. Like that was like basically the mindset, right? That's what everyone wanted to do. Obviously, it's not that easy, of course, but um yeah, that was my mindset. That was like all I was like, I want to go to the OHL, I want to go play pro. Like that was like it. But looking at it now, like NCAA is not that it needed to go a long way, but now like there's so many good players that are coming out of the NCAA playing in the NHL. Like there's new rule, like there's different rules now where if you get a couple other, maybe you get an extra year or two at tier two where you can really develop and get even better while committed to an NCAA team. And then you go play there, you got 4 years to develop again. And now all of a sudden you're going to pro at 22, 23, and you're basically getting valued the same as someone would at like 19 or 20 at the OHL. But those 3 or 4 years is a massive difference from development standpoint and from, just being a goalie. Like 3 years is huge. And I really think there's a lot of value, especially now with the NCAA route, which I don't think at the time, or at least it could have been just ignorance or not knowing any different, wasn't as prominent. But now, obviously, it is an extremely great route. Not that it wasn't before, but now I feel like it's even better than ever.
I just think it wasn't like uh, as like advertised, because all we knew
Yeah,
like growing up in the GTA was, you know, OHL. So like in the GTA there was so many teams. Like there was the Toronto St. Mike's, Mississauga Ice Dogs, Brampton Battalion were there. Like that's just in that
yeah,
small window there. And like as I said, I grew up in Peterborough, so I knew all about it. But the reason I wanted to ask that is because when I look at your OHL career, you end up making Barrie, and then the next year you go to Toronto St. Mike's, and for me it was kind of like just looking at it, and you can obviously speak to it. Kind of your 19-year-old year there when you go to the Ice Dogs is kind of that first year where you get into that starter position, and that's where we just talked about like the goalie. Some goalies develop later kind of thing. Like, do you think that like 19 year was the year where you like saw like a really big increase in your game, and you obviously won goalie of the year and stuff? So like, I just wanted to hear like your thoughts on it because I've always been
yeah.
told, goalies develop later. So like, I went to college at 19. I probably should have went at 20 or 21 kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't that cut and dry that I became a starter at 19. Actually, it was like totally opposite. I went to Barrie. After that year in Finland, I went to Barrie and I just wasn't ready. Like, what I mean, I wasn't ready at the time. I thought I was ready. And then I got there and I'm like, I think I'm ready, but the reality is I just wasn't good enough. Or I wasn't at the state that I need to be in. And I think there's a lot that goes into that, which kind of where I feel like if I would have played a year or two, I might have been a little more ready, maybe a little more just all the elements of it, the way like living with billets and all that stuff, and having all that aspect of it. And I think I just didn't really know what hard work was either. I played in Finland, and like, you know, you get by and you do your thing, and in Europe, like it's serious, but you know, the team I was on wasn't like the top team in Finland. So like, oh, sorry, their pro team wasn't crazy. Like, and I think that was a big element for me, like where I thought I worked hard, but like I had no idea. So then I got there and like, you know, I was just a little bit out of the shape, not really like as good as I could have been. Our goalie coach was like super old school. So I went from like butterfly style to all of a sudden I'm doing like barrel roll, kick saves, and oh, like seriously, like the worst goalie drills you ever seen. But you know what? Like whatever, it's just part of it. If you're there, you're there. You gotta find a way to do that stuff. And I just mentally and physically wasn't ready. And the next year, so I got traded in the summertime from Barrie to St. Mike's, and that was a big deal for me. So then I went from Carlo Koliakovo, he was goalie of the year that year in Barrie. Got traded to St. Mike's. John was the goalie coach there, and Justin Peters was just had an amazing rookie year as an underager, and he was going into his 17-year-old year, his draft year. And I got to camp that year, and I was like, wow, this kid works. This guy works. I'd never known, and Andy Chiodo was both Justin and Andy are both really good buddies of mine, and Andy was Justin's goalie partner the year before, and like these guys worked, you know, and for me, that was so eye-opening. That was like, okay, well, I need to work, like, and Justin didn't give me the net once, from a standpoint of like, he was so good that year. He was drafted second round. He was unbelievable. I played my 19 games, I think. If I played, I'd heard at some point if I played like that 20th game, it would have been a different like draft pick or something. They would have given up for me or whatever, but like doesn't matter. They would have, like, you know how it is, like they would have given it up if I was playing good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a decent year. But yeah, like I was like, again, like now I had played 2 years and I'd only played like, you know, 25 games. I don't even know how many games I played my first year, like 5, 6, 7, 8 or whatever. Actually that first year I got sent down to tier 2, and played really well there. Like, but that was like what I kind of needed. It was kind of like a little fire under me, and it was like, okay, you got to figure this out. Like, you got to really figure out, like, and it was kind of reassuring going down there for the playoffs, whatever, showing that I could play. But like, just the other elements of it, I just wasn't there, you know. And then it's too late. Like, you go down in playoffs, like to go play tier 2, like it's the season's kind of over if you're not really. Now they brought in another goalie, and like I'm third goalie, and like just whatever. So then the coach from Barrie got fired in Barrie, and the coach from St. Mike's, Dave Cameron, got hired in the NHL or the American League at the time. I forget now. And the coach from Barrie, Bud, got hired by St. Mike's. So now I actually got traded by the same coach twice. He clearly really liked me. But yeah, so he traded me to Mississauga. And during the process, so that summer, I like, we'll get to that in a sec, but that summer, I was like, I'm gonna work my like ass off. I'm gonna like physically figure this out. And I just went to town. I lived in Mississauga. I was at the goalie camp. I was training. I was working there. I was training at lunch. I was training off the ice. I like, you know, worked out with these guys. I like totally like, I went from like kind of thought where I was in shape to like, I want to be a machine. Actually, like that was my thought. Like, I'm gonna like physically work I'm gonna do everything I can, because as you know, like if you're 19 and you haven't made it in the OHL, like you're basically a year away from your career being over. Pretty close. Like I know that sounds dramatic, but like you're going down to tier two, and then whatever, like from there, basically. Like it's really tough to like once that happens, like it's really tough go, let's say. So yeah, so I went to camp that summer with St. Mike's with my old coach, and he was kind of like, and I had an extremely good camp, like really good. Like I was like really good at camp, and he's like, okay, well we're gonna trade you, like no problem. So then I went from Justin Peters to David Chance, and both were second rounders, like back to back. He actually traded me to Mississauga, which like would have put me in the same backup position again.
Well, I was just gonna
And
say quickly, like I remember the year before. So your first year in Mississauga, the year before that was, I think, Chance's rookie year, and that was the year he had like a really standout year. And as you said, got drafted because I remember I
yeah,
met him at Kineski's randomly when I was picking up my gear, and he had those silver pads, and I saw him, and my dad just like went and talked to his dad, and he introduced himself to me, and he's like, "Yeah, my son's going to Mississauga. He's going to play in the O this year," and we're like, "Oh, great! Like, we'll come watch you." And I remember watching him, and like he had a really good season. So that must have been, like as you said, you went from Peters, who I've seen that guy when he was at camps with his shirt off, like that guy was shredded and had a great work ethic, like as you said, like was just an animal, and like always you two were pushing each other. So then you're going to Mississauga, as you said, as a 18, 19-year old, and it's kind of like as you said, it's time to take the job, or the next year's tier two in a sense.
yeah. And I remember sitting down with Ronnie Mays there, and he was our goalie coach at Mississauga, and Ronnie's like, what do you I remember this, like he's like, what do you, we talked about it once a couple years ago, and he's like, we sat down, he was like, what do you want out of this? I'm like, I want to be the guy, I want to be the starter of this team. And I'm sure everyone tells the goalie coach that at the start, right? But I was like dead serious, and I just worked and worked and worked and tried to be the best guy I could with the guys, and just work as hard as possible. And then the coach would, Greg Gilbert at the time, would give me, you start out, you play that one game in the middle of a 3-3, or the third game on a Sunday of a 3-3 or whatever. Then, the next week, one game again. The next week, one game again. Then all of a sudden it started to become like, oh, maybe Mike's going to get 2 games this weekend. And then like I just kept pushing the envelope. And then all of a sudden it was like, I think I played like 20 games in a row or something. And it really was out of just determination and hard work to try to like turn it around, because I knew if I didn't, I was pretty much done. And this is not to like, if anyone's listening to this thinking like they're done, it's not the case. It's not what I'm getting at, but it's like you go from having a dream of playing the NHL to like once you start going down that level, and it's really tough to keep that high level and to keep pushing the envelope from there. So yeah, and then it ended up being a good year. I was there again for the next year. Had another good year. Went to Owen Sound at the deadline there in my overage year, and yeah, but it was that year saved my career actually. Like that year was the year that basically gave me another 17 years of playing, or however long it was after that.
I remember, like you're saying, you had a good year. I mean, you won goalie of the year, so just like incredible year to say the least. And just like looking, I think anyone looking from the outside would look like, like you said, what happened between April of 2004 to September, October of 2004, because you literally just took a massive step, and as you said, took it over there in Mississauga. And I remember watching you in the playoffs in Owen Sound. You guys played Kitchener, I believe, and I remember you, like I was at all the Kitchener games. I remember watching you and just being like this guy's stealing the series. Like I think it was you versus Dan Turple or
Yeah,
whoever it was, and I
yeah,
think Kitchener was expected to win in like sweep or five, and you guys won in six, I think, or
yeah. And we lost to London after that. Yeah,
yeah, but I just remember watching you and just like, gave your team a chance to win every night. Um, then after that, what I want to transition to. So when you're done your OHL career, was your plan always, hey, I'm going to take my school package? I don't even know if they had, if it's the same. It's not the same now, but back then I'm sure you had a school package. Am I going to go to CIS or am I going to try pro? What was your thought process there?
Yeah, I did not want to go CIS at all. I wanted to go pro badly. Like for me, going pro, like I wanted to play in the NHL. Like that was it. I was like, all right, I had 2 good years. Now what's next? And I just had no offers. Like I went to camp with Chicago, and just had no offers. So then it was like, all right, I'm going to go to. I got a. I could have gone to a lot of schools actually. Like at the end of it, like I ended up having a few offers, but obviously at UNB, UNB was just kind of not that they were just up and coming. They've always been a good school, but definitely not what they are now at the time. And they just won the other day. So like they've at the time they'd won one national championship, and it was cool. Like I mean, I went there. My good buddy Daryl Boyce was there. Another good friend, Justin DaCosta. We went together. We played together in the OHL. We went together to school. We were roommates, and um, yeah, like wasn't in the car, like wasn't planned. And I remember getting there, and I was like not excited about being there. Like I just wasn't where my feet are, and they had a starting goalie who had been there for a while, and I finally started. Like he had played like 3 years in a row of games, like never, never played a game. And then I started some games, and I was kind of in that same position as I was in Mississauga 2 years before, and it was like, okay, I got a starter, and then eventually I ended up just finding ways to keep playing and working hard, and eventually getting the net down the stretch. But like it took me a while to like really want to be there, I guess, in a sense. Like not want I wanted to be there, but it took me a while to like really just be like, all right, I'm at school, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to hammer this out in 2 years, get all my classes, do courses in the summertime. I had a year and a half done when I was playing the OHL already. I'm like, I can go here for 2 years, contribute to the program, and leave. And that was Gardner McDougall, the coach there. That was his thing. He's like, Ouz, if you want to come for 2 years and you contribute to this program and go pro after that, you'll have every opportunity you want. And I'm not going to hold you back. But you're going to come here, contribute. We want to win, and you can go. So that was it. And then we ended up winning nationals that year. It was a lot of fun, and then the next year is when things really clicked on. Like now all of a sudden we went from, it was a little bit Mickey Mouse at the time, like mix mash of gloves and equipment and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, like the next year we came in, we had like a Bauer deal with the whole team. We had like, it was just like we won nationals, and all of a sudden the program went from like, okay, we're good, to like we're ready to like become a powerhouse. And the next year we lost 2 games the whole season. One, and unfortunately one was the national championship, and the other one was like in the middle of the year, and that was it. We beat, like we went down to the NCAA, we beat those teams. We lost the game to like an NHL rookie camp team by like a goal or something. We were a really good team. And then I signed in Toronto with the Marlies, and I actually like left school and went and was living literally right there. I can see it from here in the building, and was practicing with the Marlies for the rest of the year, and was the black ace for them, and just traveled with them. And we went deep to the playoffs, like conference finals. But it was like my first taste of pro right out of university. So yeah, it was. And then I signed with them for the next year. But it was fast 2 years, but definitely I feel like kind of to the point where like now you're 22, and you're 2 years more mature, and you know a little bit more what it takes to be at that level. Like it really helped a lot.
What'd you graduate with?
Kinesiology.
Okay. And one other thing before we shift to the pro side of it, how was like CIS or U Sports, I believe it's called now, like how was it viewed back then in terms of uh like guys moving on from there, and like I just, the way I remember it, and I never went, so I can't give an accurate opinion on it, but I know when probably when you were there was maybe that like kind of, oh, like he played CIS kind of thing, like for some reason, um teams, whether it was North America or Europe, would kind of be like hesitant to take those guys. Like, did you feel it kind of had that like stigma, if you
Oh
will, like when
yeah,
you were there?
still does. I think the thing with CIS, and it's like the biggest difference I think between CIS and NCAA is NCAA. I feel like everybody, and I don't know because I didn't play, but I feel like everybody has the dream to play in the NHL still, because it's still like a relative dream. Like you can go NCAA and then go to the NHL. CIS is a little bit different because when you're in your fourth, fifth year of CIS, guys might be a little bit, they've already done the OHL thing for 4 years, and then now all of a sudden they're 25 or 26. It's like they're not as maybe eager to go play professionally after. And I feel like that brings the level down a little bit. But on your top teams, like at the time, I mean, we had, like, if you look at our roster at UMB that year, like, I mean, we had how many OHL All Stars, like 100-point players in the OHL, guys, like we had a lot of really good players, guys who had won Mem Cups, guys who were captains of Mem Cup winning teams. Like our team at UMB was like loaded with a lot of really, really good major junior players who maybe they're a little bit undersized, maybe they took a little bit longer to develop, maybe they just didn't like. There's a lot of timing that's involved too, in maybe getting drafted or whatever too, and maybe that didn't work for guys. We had draft picks, we had guys like Kevin Henderson, my second year playing in NHL, Darryl Boyce, my first year playing in
Hmm.
NHL. Um, Hunter
Another name I saw was Hunter Tromba. I think you were just about to say, like, I
Trums,
remember him from the OHL. So
yeah, he had 100 points like his last year. Like we're talking like really good players. And so the one thing I think that is different though is like CIS probably gets a little worse of a rap because there's so many teams in Ontario and a lot of them just aren't good.
okay.
And I don't mean that to be mean or anything, but like we'd come here, my second year we got ranked. We just won nationals, and then we came in and we got ranked like third or something, like to enter the next year. And I think Laurier was number one. And we came here and played an exhibition, beat them like 11-0. Like it wasn't even close. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like it was just like we were on a mission that year. And that's where I think the Ontario teams, there's so many of them compared to out east, and there's only 7 or 8 teams out there. Like it definitely makes a difference.
Well, I think it was the same too. Like just when I played junior, like the OJHL, there's so many teams. Like you have that water down effect.
Yeah,
So people would always compare, oh, you played in the OJ, but you didn't play in the AJHL in Alberta or the BCHL or the
yeah.
USHL. So I understand what you're saying there. Um,
It's not a knock on it. And at the time too, there was no, I think in Ontario, there was no scholarships either. So that plays a big role in like being able to recruit better players, because obviously if I'm going to go somewhere where I can get a scholarship, I'd probably be more inclined to go to the
yeah,
out east where you can get a scholarship. At the time, I think it's changed now, which is why the Ontario teams have come a long way in that time. But way back, like if the lower level Ontario teams were, yeah, anyway, not as good as the top end east side teams.
well, I think the CHL in general has done a better job at, you know, exciting kids about, hey, we're also focusing on your school. Like it's not just a 4 or 5 year play in the OHL, then we're done with
Yeah,
you. And now it's, I believe the rule is if you play one game each year, you get your package. Like it's something along those lines, where I know when we were coming up through the OHL, it was, depending on your draft, what round and how many games or whatever. Like, so it was definitely different, where now they're really focusing on that after. And I think that's why CAS has taken a tremendous step forward in the last couple of years. And there are great players who are like there's a guy in my league who played CIS and then went 1 year in the second Austria league in the Alps league, and now he's been in the Del 2 the past 3 years, and he's been doing really well. And that's just,
yeah,
it shows that, they're trying to, you know tighten the gap between that NCAA, as you said. But
yeah. And it'll be tough to tighten, just based on like the level, I think. But I think that it's, yeah, I mean, now there's a lot more really good teams and good players that are going that route, because it is like, I mean, you get your education paid for, like, what's wrong with that? Like, think about that, right? Like, it's pretty awesome to, you can get a scholarship to get schooling paid for to play a game that you love. It's not a bad thing, right? So
I really like too how they have the new rule where if you're when you're done in the OHL or QMJHL, whatever, you can technically play 1 year of pro with keeping your school package now. So
yeah,
so I think that
that
was
was there
cool.
too when I was there.
Was it? Okay.
I think you get like 6 months, and then you have to redshirt the rest of the year, but then you can still get your package the next year. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, any of it is good, and I think that's good to give a little buffer, because yeah, you might go pro that first year and you start out on the coast and you bounce around a little bit, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what, like, for me, a big difference maker was like, I can go to school for 2 years, get my education, finish my degree, versus going to the coast for 2 years, and who knows what happens from there, right? And I'm very happy I went the route I went, because after playing in the coast years later, I was like, wow, if I would have done this at 19 or at 2021, I probably would have wished I got my school package instead, to be honest.
Good transition here. My next question
Yeah.
was kind of the ECHL grind. Like I've asked a couple of guests on who've done it. I know myself as a goalie, when I was done college, I had the option to see if I wanted to go do it in the coast, and I was like, no, I don't even want to be a part of that because I'm not drafted. I've been off the radar because I switched from D1 to D3 college. Can you talk about like how it was for you in the coast? Like obviously I you did really well, but like was it like the grind, as people say, especially for like a goalie who like yourself like wasn't NHL drafted?
I mean, yeah, like I think it's all part of it. It's the coast. Like my first year, I started in Reading. Reading had to deal with Toronto and LA that each team could put a goalie there. So Reimer and Danny Taylor both sent down to the coast, and I was on an American League deal, like a two-way AHL ECHL deal, and all of a sudden I'm getting shipped out. I got to call my agent, like, you're going down to the Central League, and he's like, well, I'll try to keep you in the coast.
Mm-hmm.
So then I ended up in Fresno. Played pretty well there. We had a really good team. Team folds like at Christmas time, totally folded, bankrupt. Then I ended up getting reassigned back to Reading. And the coach gets fired there like 2 weeks later. Danny Taylor ended up getting reassigned to the American League, and it was Rhymes and I for the rest of the year. And then Rhymes went to South Carolina and they won there, which good for him. And yeah, it was just like, it's just, you kind of have to go through it. Like, you kind of have to be there to know what it's like. I mean, you're on the bus for long hours. You're still trying to realize this pro dream, and obviously, financially you're not going to make a ton of money in that league, but at least it's going to give you the opportunity to try to move up, and that's what it was. And then the next year I signed in Vegas. I played two years in Vegas, and actually the coach from when I was in Fresno was the coach in Vegas, so he brought me into Vegas. So I was there as a free agent there. And I waited, like I wasn't sure if I wanted to sign there, and I was waiting to see if anything. And then obviously I didn't get any American League action, so I didn't get much excitement of any teams, right? So signed in Vegas. My first year was a pretty good year, and second year was better. And I ended up with 3 call-ups that year, and I played like 2 periods. And it was like, like had about as good as of a year as I feel like you can kind of have in the coast, and only I was called up 3 times to get like 2 periods of hockey, and I was like, Europe might be a little more of an option now if I can make the jump, which is getting harder and harder to do. But at the time, I had a pretty good little window to jump.
So that basically, just to keep going on that. So after that last year in Vegas, when you get as you say, you got a couple call-ups, got those 2 periods with Houston, I believe. That summer or after that season, you're already like, okay, like I'm done with the grind, the North American thing. Like, let's go try Europe. Let's see what it's all about.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say I was done with the grind, because it's always a grind. That's what pro hockey is, a grind. I was just done with the fact, like, I just didn't see that like I really had a chance to work my way up. Like that last year in the coast that I was like an all-star game, like had pretty good numbers, and it was like, all right, well, what more can I do as a goalie in this league to like try to get a chance to the American League? And I've been called up for a cup of coffee 3 different times, and you know, they're not exactly going to call up a guy and play him. I understand that, but like my first year actually happened twice. I was on Toronto contract, and when I was in Reading, we had in the morning skate like an e-bug, like just a local doctor or someone comes in, plays, and then the goalies in like Philadelphia ended up getting injured in the American League, and these e-bugs would go up and like dress for them, and then like it's happened to me twice where those goalies end up playing in the AHL before I did, two times. And these guys in practice, like, I mean, yeah, anyway. So it just, that was pretty funny. But yeah, anyway, I kind of felt that there's not much more that I could really do. I was at the time too, now I was 25 because I had already played my 2 years, like 21 and 22 at school. And then I went to pro at 23 or whatever year behind, sorry, 2021, and then 22, 23, 24, I was playing in the coast, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're 25, like, am I going to be back in the coast? Am I like, or can I sign in Europe and hopefully get an opportunity in Europe? And that's kind of what ended up happening.
Before we transition to Europe, I just had a random thought, and you can just say yes or no to it. Do you think back then, because that was still the period, I feel like, when you were playing in the coast, like they hadn't fully transitioned away from, hey, if we have a big goalie, we can teach him how to play. Like, do you think ever sometimes maybe that you were having good seasons, but because you were a smaller goalie, that's maybe why? Like that's just this is a
Uh,
stretch. This is a stretch. I'm just trying to like throw something out there.
Honestly, like I think maybe size had something to do with it. I don't know. Like, what, like to me, I never really thought of it like that. Like,
Mm.
I just try to find ways to play bigger and present myself bigger in the net. I just feel like yeah, so many things have to kind of happen to get that opportunity. And when you get that opportunity, you got to be really good. Um, and then you got to just keep it rolling. And yeah, I mean, for me, I just didn't really get a lot of opportunities, and I just felt it was time. Whether or not it had to do with size, I have no idea. But at 5'10" on a good day, I mean, that probably didn't help. But I still believe like when you stop pucks, it will trump a lot of things, especially like maybe a little bit different going from the American League to the NHL, but I think you still, if you're stopping enough pucks, you still get opportunity in the American League, I would say.
Oh, I definitely like agree with that. I just wondered because like obviously back then it was still like, I remember guys getting drafted and I was like, well, I don't think they really had good years, but it's because they were 6'4". So all these coaches, management, whatever, were saying, okay, we have a guy here who's maybe not as great as this guy, but we believe we can teach him to play because you can't teach size, kind of thing. And
Yeah, well, you see it now, like obviously as the transitions happen to bigger goal, like I mean, happened. It's been happening over a long time, but like now that big guys can move, it really takes like that was probably my biggest thing growing up. And the reason why I kept getting opportunities was like, even though I wasn't very big, I could move. And I was like, I took so much pride in how I moved on the ice. And I think that now that the gap is like, there's no gap anymore. Like big guys can move just as good as small guys. Like there's not really an advantage there anymore, but I feel like I was ahead of that a little bit, like where I could move better than a lot of big guys could at the time, which allowed me to make more saves or make up ground because I wasn't a big guy. I had to be able to skate well. And I still feel that like if you're a small goalie and you can't skate, you're really up against the eight ball. Like you really got to be able to be a really, really good skater so that you can get better presence to the net and you can get into your positions better. And that like 2 inches or 3 inches that you might need versus a bigger guy, like you have to find ways to get to those spots. And if you can't hit your spots on time, it's going to be really challenging at the pro level.
small goalies, listen up. Um,
Yeah.
so then as we talked about, you transitioned to Europe. So first you went to Zagreb, located in Croatia, but playing in the EBEL, so the top Austrian league, and you ended up playing in that league for almost 10 seasons.
Yeah, 10 years. Yeah.
So how was that transition? Like, was it, obviously I've seen your Instagram, I've seen some of your stories. It seemed wherever you played, you lived in just beautiful places.
Yeah. That's one thing I was so lucky in my career. Like I really like when I was at the OHL, I was in Toronto, which is obviously now my home. When I like Fredericton, New Brunswick is a beautiful place. Then playing a couple years in Vegas, like then I went to Zagreb, Croatia, which at the time, like Instagram was just starting. Like that's when Instagram just came out, and like Zagreb was like Croatia was undercover incredible, right? Like now everybody knows the Croatian coast and all that kind of stuff. But back then it like nobody had heard of it. It was like on number 50 on people's travel lists, and now it's like one of the top destinations worldwide. So stunning country. Massive hockey following there, like massive. Like we had 7,000-8,000 fans a night, loudest fans. I mean, like super loud fans. And I was so lucky. I had incredible fans there, incredible fans in Linz also, and in Hungary too, for that matter. But like 7,000-8,000 people. It was interesting. Like when I first flew over there, here's a good one for you. You'll appreciate this on the management side. I didn't have my phone set up. So that was still BlackBerry times. Like we're going back 2012, 2011, 2012, whatever it was. Had my BlackBerry, didn't know that you can like get a new SIM card for, like I had no idea. And so I fly over there and you get a car, right? And so I had a car and I could drive standard, so that wasn't a big deal. But you get a car with no, like I don't have GPS. I don't know. And like if anyone's ever been to Europe, like street signs are like on the walls of buildings, like, but you don't know, like you're coming from North America, they're like huge signs everywhere, like so you're going there, you have no idea where anything is. So before I left, Scotty Hughes from Vaughan, who I worked with for a long time when I was wearing Vaughan, and I'm sure you know Scotty down in the US there. So Scotty's like, you know what, we can send your stuff to Zagreb, save you the baggage or whatever. So the team's like, all right, let's send it all the way over. I'm like, perfect. So I get the notification, okay, it's in Zagreb, like great. So then I land like one day, and then the next day we have like a team skate or something or whatever it was. I don't really recall the buffer, but like, so I get there and I open up this map and I'm like driving to the post office, and I show up there at the post office. And you ever been to Croatia? Like have you been to Croatia at all?
No, I haven't. No.
Well, it's not like Germany, Austria. Let's say it just the countries run just differently, like the way it is, and like, and I mean that in the sense of, which is funny, like you go into the post office, and there's just like one guy sitting behind the desk, like hanging out, and I'm like, oh, like I get in there's a huge box that says Vaughn Hockey on it, like it's just massive box. I'm like, well, that's obviously my gear. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm like pointing at it, can't speak a word of Croatian, and the guy's like, tomorrow, like sutra, like he's saying like tomorrow. I'm like, well, just I need the gear so I can go like practice this morning. Like I went the morning of whatever, and and so I get there. So the guy doesn't give me this box. So now I go to the rink. And I'm at the rink. I have like what I went over there with, like whatever, skates, mask. I think I have my old pants or something. And the trainer comes up to me. He's like, "You can wear my equipment today." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Oh, they want you to practice today." I'm like, you don't know any different. Like first time in Europe, you want to make a good impression. So I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. Like, you know how it is. Like, you can't wear someone else's gear, let alone someone else's gear from like 15 years ago. So this guy pulls out like heating pads and like just, you know,
The
so
blocker
I
that's
wore
curved, the curved
So I
blocker.
like legit wore this guy's gear my first practice over in Europe, felt every puck, didn't want to butterfly because you couldn't butterfly in these pads. it was just terrible experience. Like first day, I'm like, this is terrible. The next day, I said to the GM, like, hey, like, can you come with me? Like, so we can go get this. The next day we show up to the post office. They're like, all buddy, like, oh, hey, like, how's it going? Like, oh, yeah, I get points to the thing. Take the box to go. We were there for like 10 seconds. I was like, what a joke. So anyway, the next day I practiced the first time with the new team in my gear, but that was pretty funny. Welcome to, could you imagine your goalies right now? Like, guy shows up with no gear and you get him to wear the trainer's old gear from 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, to me, that just reminds me of like a classic European story. Like that's just Europe hockey
Yeah,
in a nutshell. And they're so laid back, right? Like they don't think anything of it. Like, oh,
that's
don't
what I
worry, you
mean.
can wear my gear. Don't worry about it. Like,
That's what I meant by like how Croatia is just different than Austria. Like they're so laid back in Croatia. It's just the culture there, which is amazing. It's something that I grew to love actually. Like I really appreciate the way um the culture is there, because it's so like they really, somebody like put it into perspective for me. It's like they, like here in Canada we live to work. Like
mm,
now that I'm retired, like all I do is work. And there, like they work to live, and they really enjoy life, and they really enjoy, having coffees and the culture of being with people, and they're not in a rush to do anything. And there is an element to that which I think is pretty awesome. So like, yeah, that's what I meant by, but Austria is a lot more like Canada, I would say. But anyway, in Croatia I found they were a lot more laid back, and I came to really enjoy that actually.
Croatia seems, it reminds me of France. Like when I played my 2 years in France, every day from 12 to 3, every place was closed except for the restaurants.
Yeah,
You'd see the bank ladies crushing 2 bottles of wine. Like, as
yeah,
you said, like they're enjoying their life. They're in no rush
yeah.
to do anything.
That's
Like
how Croatia is too. Yeah,
post stuff that in Canada would be there within 2 to 3 days. Nah, it's 2 weeks. Who cares? I will get to it. Like it was
yeah,
just the laid
yeah,
back, no stress kind of
yeah,
mindset. Um, so while you were playing, there was two things I remember seeing. You started a goalie school. I'm not sure if you're still doing it, but I believe it was you did some camps in Australia, and
yeah.
then also you were a DJ or still are a DJ, part-time DJ. Do you want to comment on those two things?
Yeah, so DJing, I mean, I've been doing that since I played in Vegas, which is pretty cool. So I learned, that was like when, Swedish House Mafia was building up. I remember seeing Avicii the first time I played in Vegas. Like that was like a big thing for me. I loved that kind of music. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just learn how to do this. I've always wanted to. So I just bought decks and figured it out. I did some lessons over in Croatia too with the DJ there to learn how to play like the pro, like Pioneer DJ setup. And I would DJ clubs there when I was playing. I knew a lot of the DJs, so I could just jump in with a USB stick and play a little bit. And oh, I loved it. It's so much fun. Still a great hobby of mine. I love playing. And the goalie camp kind of came later. Actually, it was a bit of a hack to go on a trip to Australia a couple summers in a row. I would have kept doing it. COVID shut that down, but otherwise I would have kept it going, because like it was a lot of fun. You go down there. I mean, they're grassroots hockey, very basic, but for 3 days, do a camp, show them, a little bit of North American training to an extent. But like, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I mean, you go to Sydney, Australia, and Melbourne, Australia for 2 weeks is not too shabby. So it was great. I'd go like for 2 weeks every summer. It's
Oh,
really
that's
good.
that's really good. And to be honest, I really enjoyed like I followed you on Instagram, and I remember I was, at the time I was still actively playing. So I would
Yeah,
watch your videos, kind of take some drill ideas, especially like you,
yeah,
as you said, you were known for your speed and movement and how you moved, especially like laterally. And I really enjoyed watching those videos. I felt like anyone who would have seen them, it was kind of like, think you could learn things from them. It was very, very good to see. And you doing it, because it's different when someone tells you, hey, you got to do this, and this. But then if they see you doing it motion for motion, it was always, I just found it really helpful.
yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean it's funny, but like I did all those YouTube videos like once a week, and they're boring. Like they're boring drills, but those are the drills that I would do every summer. Like I had a system every summer where I'd be like, okay, I have 20 skates. Skates like one, I would do like I think I had it planned out like 7 movement sessions and then 13 shooting sessions. And that would also be in tandem with my off ice program, and everything would just kind of build. So I had like basically 16 weeks of training, and I would build. I would start out like 1 skate a week, 1 skate a week, 2 a week, 2 a week, 3 a week, 3 a week, and then 4, and then camp kind of thing. So I would do a slow build up to kind of get all my points back, and super boring to watch, but those are drills that I feel like goaltending on a lot of it is very boring to watch. Like if you watch goalie practice, like it's not, you're not doing crazy drills every day. There's so many elements of like just being really, really good at basics and hitting your spots really well, that like if you start in the post and you T push and you hit your spot, and like I want to be able to do that with my eyes closed, so I hit my spot every time and don't even think. But the nuts and bolts of it is extremely boring and not sexy at all. Like that's training, that's it.
And I think, to be honest, I noticed that a lot over here, especially when I was beginning with teaching, is there was one place in particular I taught kids once a week, and their parents were getting frustrated. They're like, well, you keep doing these drills, like, every month I'd say you do this drill twice out of the 4 sessions or whatever, like there'd be hour and a half sessions each time. And they're like, we watch all these drills online, like, why don't you do something more like complicated? Like it's clearly too easy for my son or my daughter. And I would just say, well, if we do this drill 5 times in a row, and like you said, if they're not hitting the post all 5, like imagine what happens in a game when it's not controlled. Like I'm like, the reason they're at a young age, it's repetition. It's like, whatever the saying is, 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours to become an expert. Like goaltending, especially drills, like they're not supposed to be like complicated, fancy 6-shot drills. Like they are boring, they get repetitive, but then you do see it during the year when it's the situations you don't have to think anymore. You're just reacting.
Yeah, and I mean boring, I mean like they're just not, it's not always sexy, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just a matter of like Instagram has made things, I think, a little overvalued of like the elements needed sometimes. And it's like if you hit your spots really well and you get in a good position, you give yourself a really good chance to make saves. And I think that's where like I took so much pride in my training, and so much like I really took a lot of time, and that's why I really appreciated those. I would just rent the ice myself and just go out there and just hit my spots, and it was super boring. I'd watch the tape back. Am I big in the net? Is my glove in good position? Are my feet set? Am I on the right angle? Am I hitting my post consistently? RVH, all that stuff. Like I did thousands and thousands of reps of RVH over the course of my career, and I really wanted to become like an expert at it. Like actually like take the time to be like, okay, if I slide in this way, can I hit the bridge of my, like, to the point where I don't ever think? And if I miss, can I play off my skate? And if I miss, can I play out of the inside of my net? And I see that a lot, at the NHL level. If someone misses their post, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so I took so much pride into trying to like figure all that out. And that's kind of actually like kind of when I knew I was kind of nearing the end, is when I didn't find a lot of excitement in just doing that kind of stuff, because that's what that drove me for so long, and trying to learn and get better.
You just brought it up. I was going to ask, so what eventually
Yeah.
led to you transitioning out of like playing, and now you're obviously in real estate, but what was kind of the deciding factor at the NK? It's been a good career, but it's time to turn the page.
Yeah, I mean, the two big factors, I think. The first one was the trickle down effect. So I kind of hit my peak in Linz, and the highest level I was going to play at in Austria, and that was great. But like Linz is a really high level team. Um, they take care of players very well. And once I was there for 6 years, which is incredible. Then they let me know they weren't going to re-sign me, which that's definitely part of it. But I was so grateful for the time there. And then you get offers in the summer, and they're just different teams, not as good of teams, not as good of salary, not as good of all of it, basically. And it was like, okay, well, so I ended up signing on a team in Hungary, which I had a lot of fun there. But still, like, you kind of go like this, you keep trying to work your way up, and then you start coming down a little bit. And yeah, and then it was obviously COVID was a big factor. Like now all of a sudden I'm in Europe, which I love living in Europe, and I couldn't even leave my apartment. and I couldn't go out for coffee, and I couldn't go out for a beer, and I couldn't, do all the stuff that I just loved about Europe. That was what I loved about it. And then I got hurt. So then I had a concussion. I already had a couple before, and I rushed back. And during that time, I'd also started my real estate course online, because actually, that was one thing with the pandemic that allowed me to really like do courses online. And now all of a sudden I could do my real estate license online. And I was like, all right, well, once I start this, I have 2 years. I was 35 at the time. I'm like, I have to be done in 2 years. So I'll play this season and maybe get a bonus the next season. Like bonus meaning like get another contract as a bonus for another year. And then I know I'm done. And then I got hurt and rushed back a little bit too early, hurt again. And I was like, I'm done. This is not worth you know my health to just keep fighting for something that I'm just not. I just started losing my excitement to do all the stuff that made playing so fun for me. Like I loved training, I loved trying to get better, I loved trying to learn, I loved all that aspect of it. Once any of those factors started to waver for me, I was like, I'm, what's the point at this point? Like if you're not going to enjoy the process, you're not going to enjoy what you're actually doing. So I made the jump to real estate.
Well, it's good. Like, I think it's really for a lot of athletes, just talking to them personally, and I was obviously on the other side of it too, is you kind of have that fear of like what's after hockey, because it's all you've known for your whole life. Is like I started playing hockey when I was 3, so played till I was whatever,
Yeah.
28, 29, so almost 30 years. And then I find it really good that you always had like a plan. Like you knew like, okay, I like real estate. I want to try to be a real estate agent, want to get involved in that. And here's my 2-year window to do the license and play maybe 1 or 2 more years of hockey. And like some guys, as I said, they struggle with that. Like they're nervous for life after. I personally know a player playing in this league who played, NHL games, long time AHL, high levels of Europe. And he said this is his last year, and he's talked to some people I know, and I asked him, hey, what's the real world like, or what's life after hockey like? And he's like, I'm nervous. So
It's definitely different. For me, the biggest thing was like I've always been entrepreneurial. Like you said, I had the goalie camp going. I built an app at some point too. Like I went through that process. I had hired a company to build an app out for me and do some stuff like that. So I've always been like pretty entrepreneurial. I do think that the real estate thing, like I've been investing in real estate since 2014. So actually it's something I've been doing for a long time. My dad's a realtor, my aunt's a realtor. It's kind of runs in the family, and I love it. And what I would do is I would buy places, I would live in them in the off season, I would rent them out, I would like furnish them, renovate them, update them, and then rent them out when I was gone. So I'd rent them out for 6 to 8 months a year, and then when I moved back in the summer, I always had a place to live, or I'd buy another one, and then I would do the same. So when I was playing, I'd accumulated a few properties, and I liked that aspect of it. And then it was just a matter of, I want to do this for a living. So then so then I just started getting my license, and that's what I do full time now. It's been a pretty fun. I just started year 3, so it's been a pretty fun transition. And I find a lot of the lessons in, I'm sure any business, but especially in real estate, are very similar to being a goalie. I think that the wins, the losses, the boring, non-sexy stuff that you have to do every single day, that like, yeah, it looks really cool on Instagram when I do, video tours of houses and stuff like that. But like, that's a very, like, it's a big part of what I do, but it's also not all of what I do, and the $1 million listing New York's like, that's all the sexy stuff, which is cool. And that stuff is amazing. It's so much fun. But there's also the elements of like I run a business, like I actually am my own business, literally. So there's elements that you have to invest in your business. You have to get proper coaching. You have to do the right systems and build the systems and all this stuff. Like think of if you were to take a goalie from scratch right now, how would you turn them into a pro? It's the exact same thing, just it's the same sport, just a different game, if that makes sense. It's all the same elements. You got to establish a system. You got to create the work ethic. You got to bring in all the elements. And I found that like for me, this path is really given me the same. I still get the same like kind of excitement that I did when I was playing. And that was the other thing too with transitioning was like I was starting to get more excited about the next what was coming next than I was playing. And I knew for me, once that happens, the game's funny. Like the game probably injured me in the sense of like it was like not the game that injured me, but like it was like, all right, you're not going to be all in on this. Like you're done. We're going to spit you out, and you can go on with your way. You know, that's how I feel sometimes. But no, yeah, it's been a fun transition. I love real estate. I would love to, you know, if hockey players wanted to learn like how to build wealth in real estate. Like I think I bought my first place in 2014, so almost 10 years ago. And for example, in Toronto, on average, the property will double every 10 years. And if I wouldn't have purchased that property in 2014, come retirement, now all of a sudden, like I'm chasing a real estate market, trying to get a place to live. So, you know, that was an element of it too.
That's one thing, honestly, that I regret not doing when I was playing was kind of like investing in at least one property. Because as you
Yeah,
said, like you have somewhere to stay during the summer, and then also you can renovate it a bit, furnish it, and then like it's just a stream of income during the year if you find someone who's, you know, looking to stay for whatever it is, 8 9 months, or you know, it's just an easy way to make some money on the side. Because obviously, you know, Europe hockey, I think you're treated really well, but it's obviously not NHL salaries and stuff like that. So,
exactly.
but no, I'm like, that's one thing. As I said, my dad says the same thing to me. Is like, we should, if we could do it again, we should have
But
invested.
yeah, but it's never too late. But I like for me, the biggest thing was my parents when they started seeing what I was paying in rent every month, and like my dad's a realtor. He's like, it's time for you to buy something.
Hmm.
Second, you can get your minimum down payment saved up. He's like, get something, let it do its thing over time. Even if it's not cheap, because right, properties definitely still aren't cheap. Like it's the same conversation 10 years ago as it is now. It's just obviously it's more expensive now, but back then was the same conversation. It's still expensive, and you know, you're still getting a condo at the time was like, you know, whatever, 300,000, but like that's still a lot of money back then 10 years ago. Like it, you know, it's different. But yeah, no, that's what I did. And it allowed me to, when I retired now, like I had a place to live. I could move right in. I didn't have to try to get a mortgage without having a job. Like, you know, it's very different. So I was able to move in and have my rental properties, and just it gave me a lot of stability when I was retiring as well.
When you look back on your playing career or your life of hockey, like do you do you think it would have taken you as far as it did?
I mean, I think like everyone want like I wanted to play in the NHL. I think once you realize that maybe it's not going to happen, but you can still have a pretty great career and enjoy it. No, I mean, I I enjoyed the process, but I didn't really enjoy it until I was like probably 32, 33 years old. And I had an awesome goalie coach in Linz, and he really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I was always like in the rat race, like just like everybody else, and always like, how do I get better? How do I, you know, it's the typical old saying. It's like, how do you keep like I want to get to the next level and the next best thing and the next best thing, and then you make X amount of dollars, you want to make Y amount of dollars, and you make Y and you want to make Z, and like you just want to keep whatever. Like it's tough to be satisfied, but like I look at it now and I'm like, what a life. Like how awesome was that, you know? Like I was able to live a dream for like literally playing a dream till I was 35 or 36 years old. And um it's pretty amazing when I look back at it now. It feels like an eternity ago, like now that I'm 2 years out, but at the same time, you know, I'm so grateful for having the opportunity to play a sport for a living, and that sport also set me up for the next part of my life too.
And you also I just by going online a little bit, you also have a podcast yourself, as we talked about before, a little bit off the air. Do you want to tell anyone listening just kind of about that, and like what your you know, what's your goal with that? I guess you would say, is it something just kind of a hobby and kind of do from time to time, or is it something you want to do regularly, weekly?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I started this podcast as a way to I really want to interview like hockey guys that are into real estate. That's kind of like where the idea started. But there is a podcast actually out right now. It's called Pucks to Properties, and I was on their podcast, and they actually had that idea and have been running with it for a while. So like hadn't heard of it, but then now it's still very similar, like guys who maybe have played a little bit of hockey but are realtors. I want to interview some good coaches and stuff like that, like people that I've met along the way. And yeah, just like, I don't know, it's fun, and it gives me more content to put out on social media and stuff like that, so that I can like kind of the same thing like you were saying, like, you maybe regret not buying a place where you're playing like however many years ago. Well, I want to teach guys how to do that. And so when they're 24 and they maybe get a nice contract, or the first time they do get that contract, can they purchase a property that in 10 years will do some work for them on the equity side? And I'd love to teach anybody that. That's kind of what I want to do with this podcast. And it's just a matter of having great conversations, having people learn like this. And I do think there's so much value to talk to different people, and it's fun too. Like sometimes it's nice to not be the one talking all the time and just ask the questions. I like that aspect of it too, because I run out of things to say, believe it or not, too. So yeah, no, I like it. Anyone can check that out, the Michael Ouzas podcast. I couldn't think of a name for the life of me, so I was like, whatever. I got to get this thing started. So I just was like, that's the easiest thing. YouTube is probably where I'm putting most of my attention right now. So if anyone's interested in learning about the Toronto real estate market, most specifically, YouTube is what I'm really focusing on, and that's taken up a lot of my time from an editing perspective and stuff like that. But tons of resources on there, just trying to put out information, and Instagram, of course.
Just trying to be helpful for everyone out there listening, which is
There you go.
and yeah, like honestly, kind of like you said, like it's cool to share stories, cool to talk to people about their experiences. And as you said, like my first episode, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do, like 30 minutes, and it was 45, and then the next one was an hour, then it was an hour 20. And like for me, I think that's what's cool about it, is there's no like set time for talking. It's just let the guy ask the questions, let them share their experience, and then they kind of go down memory lane too with it. And that's
Yeah,
kind of the joy I get out of it.
it's been fun to like think about those things. Like you asked me about Finland, like man, like that's like going in the vault. There's a lot of stories that I can't even like remember until I have to like physically think about them. Like, so no, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, the last one before you go, I
Yeah.
always ask the guests this, and I think it's good for any young listeners out there. What is one piece of advice, or maybe if you have a couple, that you would have given your younger self? So as we've gone down memory lane here, you're looking back, like if you were to tell your 16-year-old self again some advice, what would you say?
Oh, that's a loaded question. 16-year-old self. I think the three things that any hockey player needs to think about is, one is the patience of it, is that it doesn't just all happen right away. And with that, it probably won't happen the way you plan it out in your head anyways. So I think just being patient and being where your feet are is huge. Two is, if you want to be, I'm sure you see this too, the players who I always find have the best careers or the longest careers are the ones that really dedicate themselves to their craft and the work and the just all encompassing everything about being a hockey player. There's very few that just have so much talent that they just get by for a long, long time. They'll get by for some time, but it catches up to them in the end. And three is just enjoying the process of it, just enjoying the grind or the ebbs and flows or the bus rides, and being with the guys and or girls if you're on a women's team, and just enjoying that entire process of all of it, because it's gone faster than you think. And then all of a sudden you're in real life. And I'm in real life now. I'm 37, 38, and now like it feels like a distant memory of the only life I ever knew. So it's something that I really feel enjoy it and milk it for as long as you can.
Those are three really important things that I think everyone should definitely take into consideration, especially the last one. I've had, like as I said, you're my fourth guest so far, and I think three of the four people have said enjoy the process, and that's so true because as we all know, it for some of us it ends earlier than others, and you don't know how long, and then you look back and you miss those bus trips with the boys, locker room, living in Europe, all that, the grind, as you said, the ups and downs. So,
Yeah, and that's why like I even come in the office pretty much every day. Like we have a really awesome group here at the office that just taking that 20 minutes in the morning and have a coffee and talk to people. Like real estate is a could be a lonely business if you do it on your own. Like I can work from home every day and not only talk to like I'm not talking to like peers as much as I'm talking to clients and stuff, but having that like friends in the industry and people you can bounce ideas off of and talk to, just like it's the same kind of thing as being in hockey. Like when you're on a team, you guys are going through the same stuff all together, right? So there's always common ground there, and just that camaraderie of it is huge and probably something that I miss the most, I would say.
and on that, I'd just like to thank you again for taking the time to talk to me and share your story. And yeah, hopefully we'll see each other this summer. Now that you're in the GTA, I'll have to swing my way down
I'm
and you can
here
show me some real estate properties.
anytime you want. I'm here. Actually on May 11th, like if anyone's in town, I'm gonna do an in-person seminar for hockey guys. People pretty much like in kind of your situation that you're in Europe and back and forth, or you're playing and back and forth. Like I kind of want to. I'm still building that up, but it's going to be, I think May 11th is what the tentative date, and it'll be myself, a mortgage broker, and we'll just kind of lay out the entire system of how I did it and how to do it on for anyone else who wants to learn. So yeah, there we go.
If anybody wants to learn, May 11th, write it in
May
the
11th.
calendar.
I'll see you there. Harrison, May 11th. See you in 2 months.
Michael, thanks again.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And for the listeners, until the next one, cheers and ciao.